Okay, for today in Honors Pre-Calc, we took a top 20, and I don't need to explain a lot of that on the video, but that would, it was an optional one, so if you missed today, it's not that big of a deal. You can take it or not take it because it's a top 20 that can replace your old top 20 score in the gradebook. But I wanted to give you some advice about the lab, so that's what I'm going to title this video, is advice about the TIDES lab. Some things I've told you that you may have forgotten. As you look at your lab, please take it out if you haven't already. Look at your lab write-up. Number one, and this is, first of all, not an exhaustive list. This isn't everything you have to know, but it's some pertinent reminders. Like, for instance, did you remember that this is one of all the labs, and therefore the format for all labs does apply? Like, for instance, procedure. There's a procedure section. You should have a procedures section. You should have a, what's that very first thing called? Like the purpose. Good, you should have a purpose section where, by the way, you cannot just copy word for word what the purpose of the lab says. You have to say it in your own words because I think that's more valuable. So you'll actually lose points if you copy it word for word. So you need to have the format for all labs and follow that. So you got all those sections. Number two, I wanted you to tell me why you picked that area to study, as in you picked the coast of Greenland or whatever for your TIDE lab data. You need to have a screenshot of where it was so that we can know all about this spot. And why? Why did you pick that spot? And now we won't be able to prove that you've always had an obsession with Iceland, but you know, it's okay. Just tell us why. Why? If you don't say why, that's going to be a problem. Number three, you remember you had to have 2 highs and 2 lows. Okay, 2 high tides and 2 low tides, and it's not that complicated. We want to get it down so you really just have 1 high and 1 low tide. So how are we going to do that? Just average them. You should have averaged your high tides and averaged your low tides so that you can get a high tide and a low tide. And then there's 4 different times that these highs and lows happened, right? Let's say it was high tide here at 3 p.m. and it was a low tide here at 9 p.m. and then there was another high tide and another low tide. There's a time period between each high and low tide, and there should be, if there are 4, if there's 2 highs and 2 low tides, then there should be actually 3 time periods, isn't there? Between 4 data points, there would be 3 in-betweens. Those are your times. You're supposed to average the time between. Now, how do you average a time when you have 2:30 and 9:45? You've got to figure out how long that is in hours, and you might end up with decimal hours. But be careful. 2.3 obviously is not the right decimal for 2:30, right? 2:30 is not 2.3. You'll have to get your time worked out so you don't screw up the fact that otherwise, 2:59 is like really, really close to 3, but you'd call it 2.59. That doesn't make sense at all, right? So make sure you deal with that. If you didn't deal with that properly, you're going to lose points. Let's see. And then, of course, at the end, the actual sinusoidal part, where you actually have to show that this thing comes out to, and I strongly recommend using cosine. You got an A cosine of B parentheses theta minus C plus D, and you should have that. I mean, that's the answer, is that equation. If you don't have that written out somewhere, that'd be pretty sad, because that's the whole point. And you got to, of course, have figured out what all of these things are. The only thing, not the only thing, there's quite a few things that you need to figure out. Like, this has an equation related to it that hopefully you used, and the person will be able to find how you volumed your B term. The person will need to check how you got your shift. Okay, and if you have to, go back and watch old videos about how you do sinusoidals. That shift is always something. That's It's a really easy spot to find in your data. And then last is this shift, which has to do with the midline, the line right between your highs and your lows. Yes? 2 highs and 2 lows. Now, typically, that's going to be 1 day. If it's over the course of 2 days, that's not a big deal to me. I just want you to have had 2 highs and 2 lows. Any other questions? All right, do quality job on your lab. Be ready to have that graded on Monday. And we'll launch into some more challenging stuff. Last thought, especially since I'm not giving you any new homework, the homework that you had to do for today becomes especially like easy for me to say, yeah, you should have been able to get that done. You had a whole extra weekend to do it. So I have your homework done that was due today. I don't want to reiterate which questions those were. If you have to, go watch the video from yesterday to find out which problems I assigned there. Any other last questions? Okay, so today was kind of like a little bit of a catch-up day in here, and we'll launch full bore on Monday. That's all I got for you for today.